is talking to when Bogart and Holt arrive. And I think he has one line of dialogue that he asks Walter Houston, is indeed Jack Holt. Tim Holt was a contract player at RKO Radio Pictures, probably most noted for being in B westerns, programmers, usually of a 60-minute duration. He made literally dozens of them at RKO Radio. But that was not the only thing that he ever did film-wise. He is pretty close to being the star of a prestigious Orson Welles film called The Magnificent Ambersons. And he, I think, does an incredible job considering that he's working opposite a couple of the biggest scene stealers that the movie's ever created, Humphrey Bogart and Walter Houston. Did you think he came across well? Holt has I think, a personality that lent itself to the role that he creates here of a good-natured human being who, given the opportunity to do something bad, and there's a key scene where the cave-in takes place, and Bogart is definitely trapped in this rubble, and at the entrance to the mine stands Tim Holt, and you can almost see the wheels going around. I think I just earned his steak. And he turns around and starts to walk away, but then conscience, that old bugger, conscience, rears its head, and Holt decides that the better part of virtue here is to indeed go in and save his partner's life. Tim Holt had a career that ended when B movies kind of went out of fashion in 1952. Television had pretty much eroded the B Western at movie theaters. Westerns were starting to crop up on television, and Holt retired to a ranch that he had in Oklahoma, and eventually became, it sounds like not a great career, but I don't think Holt was really looking to continue to be in the headlines. He became the manager of a radio station in Oklahoma. The other thing, and I'll mention briefly, and I'm going to have to resort to my notes because honestly, Zachary was the guy who was going to come in here and talk about B. Traven, this kind of mysterious author who, if you read about him, you will discover there's so many different versions of who B. Traven was. But John Huston was supposed to meet B. Traven in Mexico before the filming of Treasure of Sierra Madre started. And when he arrived at the meeting, he was greeted by a man who, and I'm going to have to resort to my notes here. Met by a man who called himself Hal Croves, C-R-O-V-E-S. Croves identified himself as being authorized by Traven to oversee the filming of Sierra Madre, acting as the technical advisor. This intrigue prompted those associated with the production to wonder if indeed Croves was actually Traven. Houston initially believed that may be the case, but subsequently recanted that notion. When crew members asked Crows directly if he was Traven, he always denied that possibility, but did so in a manner which seemingly left it open for discussion. Multiple theories, suspicions abound about B. Traven's true identity, and biographers have differed greatly in their conclusions. Look him up, Wikipedia, there's really a lot of information, and the different stories about who he really was is pretty fascinating. Any regrets watching this film?
None.
Do you feel cheated of 2 hours and 6 minutes of your life?
No.
Would you ever do this again?
Sure.
Oh. Okay. Now, any questions? Yes, sir.
How much of the film was actually filmed on location, do you know? Do you have a percentage?
You mean day-wise?
Yeah. What percentage of the footage is on location as opposed to in a soundstage?
Well, I think
background.
I think anything that you saw that was outdoors and was expansive as far as the photography was concerned was shot in Mexico. They spent a great deal of time down there, as I said, much to Jack Warner's consternation.
They had color in films at this time. Do you have any idea what the idea was besides why they shot it in black and white as opposed to color?
I think they would have been doing a detriment to the story.
Yeah.
I think the black and white photography lent itself to the rather grim nature.
Right.
I think it would have been not as effective if it was in color. Yes, sir.
I would be interested in your co-panelists' assessment of Tim Holt's performance. You started to ask, I think, but she never got a chance to respond.
You did start to ask, and you didn't get a chance to respond. That's true.
I didn't follow through with the question.
You didn't, but it's okay. It's okay.
Answer the question.
To be honest, I was a bit distracted by his handsomeness. But I felt that he was a really real character. I felt that he had a really, he was, I guess, just very real. I felt that he added the human side of it, and you could really see his struggle, especially in that cave part. Yeah, I liked his performance.
Any, Miss Mosher.
No, it's not me. It's
Yes, sir.
Had John ever directed his father prior to this?
Walter Houston, and I don't know if you want to call it directing, Walter Houston has a very brief appearance in The Maltese Falcon. He plays Captain Jacoby, who shows up, and I'm not too sure if Jacoby has the Blackbird with him, but he shows up at Philip Marlowe's office and proceeds to expire rather quickly. But it was definitely Walter Houston in a film co-starring Bogart and directed by John. And of course, I don't think too many people here do not realize who the American was who was constantly pestered by Bogart at the beginning. That was John Huston. Yes, sir.
Not really a question, but more of a comment. I think the great irony is that, you know, they did do all that hard work and lose their fortune. But they actually, had they not gone that journey, they wouldn't have found the fortunes that they wound up at the end of the film. Walter Houston wound up being the medicine man in that village and being hampered, and it kind of hints that Tim Holt ran off with the other guy's widow to have his fruit farm after all. So,
Well, at least he was headed in that direction.
That's true.
I think you were pretty much assured what was going to happen to Walter Houston. As he described it, I don't think he was fibbing. There was no exaggeration. He was the king, the ruler, the man who everybody admired because he had brought the little boy back to life.
That's a beautiful scene.
Yes, ma'am.
It might have been helpful to know Spanish, because they certainly didn't use any subtitles. Did they use subtitles in that?
You know, I think that, honestly, the action is
Yes, you could.
is clear enough so that you don't need them. And what I did read background-wise was the fact that the only Spanish Humphrey Bogart knew was enough to get him a beer. That's all he. In fact, maybe it was just the name of a brand of beer that was popular at the time down in Mexico. Walter Houston knew absolutely no Spanish whatsoever, and he learned, I believe, by having somebody who was fluent in the language recording his lines, and he studied the recordings very intently. And I don't think from the performance that he gives and from the speech pattern that he presents, usually if somebody is not familiar with the language, that it's kind of obvious. There's a hesitation in the speech, but I didn't sense that in Houston's performance. I'm not sure about Tim Holt. I would assume he was in the same boat, not knowing how to speak Spanish, but he had far fewer lines. That was more thank yous and just very, very brief sentences.
I thought the Mexicans were kind of stereotyped. I was kind of distracted by it.
Honestly, this was a problem when they started to shoot the movie down in Mexico. There was reports that people had read the script and thought that it was very demeaning to the country, and that it was not representative of what the country is. And the production company represented